We just wanted to ask you a few questions and just kind of get some get some answers to some things that you've probably talked about before, but we might not remember. So first of all, kind of tell us a little bit about growing up in Wood Harrell, and don't just say you had to walk 5 miles to school each way, carrying a syrup bucket in the snow or whatever. But just kind of tell us a little bit about growing up in Wood Harrell.
Of course, you want to know about growing up in Whitehall? Well, there was about probably 5 or 6 years of growing up before I moved to Whitehall. We lived in several different places, several different houses scattered around Whitehall. The first place I really remember living was up on the Hawk place, and I was probably about 4 years old. Then we moved from there to the Avery place, and then from there to the Ansonic place, and wherever we could find a place to live. Then we moved to Whitehall, and Dad bought a place from a little house from his mother, a little one bedroom, one kitchen, whatever house, and there was at that time there was four of us, I guess, kids and Mom and Daddy, as before Butch, Sissy, and Ronnie was born. And but growing up in Whitehall, there was not a whole bunch to do. We went to school. We came home from school, and if we had anything to do, if we didn't have chores to do at that time, then we'd go play. And play was not riding bicycles or video games. It was like we played kick the can. I don't know whether you ever heard of that or not.
Yeah, I used to play it.
But kick the can and rolling tires and throwing corn cobs at each other.
Did you have a garden that you liked to work in?
Yes, we did have a garden. That's how we got most of our food, was out of the garden. And I enjoyed working in the garden. We always had green beans, and we always had squash, and we had a lot of okra and potatoes. And Mother canned and put it down in the old cellar, and that's what we eat on all winter. And contrary to what my wife now and my daughter now thinks, food didn't expire then. You didn't throw things away, you eat it. Like now, everybody looks at the date, expiration date or sell by date.
Yeah.
Everybody knew what that was. Back then, we eat it because we needed something to eat. We never went to bed, and living in Whitehall, growing up in Whitehall, none of us ever went to bed hungry. We might have had biscuits and gravy or oatmeal for breakfast or fried bologna, and maybe on Sundays sometime we'd have a roast. And we always had chickens. You know, we'd have 12 or 15 chickens that we'd raise, and we'd go out and take a chicken, wring its head off, scald it in water, and pluck it. That's what we'd have maybe on Sundays sometime, you know. And but growing up in Whitehall, there wasn't too many people there. There was like when I was younger, my dad worked at one grocery store, and they sold gasoline and hardware, and then there was one other grocery store, which was Walden's, which later, the first one that my dad worked at closed down, and then there was only Walden's. And when I was growing up in high school, and before I got to high school, well, I worked at Walden's grocery store after school and on Saturdays. And from the time the first job I ever had, Kelly, I got to tell you about this. I worked at a laundry. Old Lady Gord owned the laundry, and that was when they had the old ringer type, agitator type laundries, and she'd hire me, and I'd work in the mornings. She'd pay me 50 cents in the morning, and then she'd say, "Come back this afternoon, and if there's anything to do, you can work again." Well, most of the time, people just done their washing in the morning, and I usually found, I'd find 15 or 20 cents when I went to clean went to clean the tubs out every time after somebody washed. Well, they'd be a quarter, 15 cents or something. I made as much money just about on the coins that I found as I did on the laundry. That was my first job, and I worked there for a long time. And then I shined shoes. I shined shoes for a dime on Saturdays in front of the grocery store that my dad worked at. And I always made a little bit of money, $50, $75 on Saturdays. And then I guess after I went to school, the first actual job I had there in Wood Harrell when I was a freshman in high school, or 8th grade or freshman in high school, I can't remember which, but they built a new home ec department there at the school. And I worked for the bricklayers, and every morning I'd go wake them up at 6 o'clock, cook their breakfast, and then go mix some cement for their bricks while they were eating. And then they'd come to work, and I'd carry their bricks and their cement to them for the rest of the day. And that was a good job because they were union, and they had to pay me pretty good money. And then one summer, I measured. They used to have a cotton allotment. And one summer, I had a job with Stanley Ansnick's brother, and we measured cotton. You took a wheel and measured how many acres, or took a chain and measured it by the chain or the wheel. And I made pretty good money that summer. And then I'd always go back to the Waldens after school started and work there. And then in the fall, a lot of times I worked at the gin, running the suction at night on the night shift, and then try to go to school in the daytime. But that's interfered with a lot of things. But I did it because I needed the money. But everybody knew everybody in Wood Harrell. The kids that I started the school with, probably out of 25 or 27 or 28 of them that I started the school with, we never picked up any new kids, maybe one or two along the whole 12 years. And we all graduated, the same bunch. And to this day, the ones that are still alive, we have a reunion every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And everybody, and everybody's still alive, still goes. I know. My best friends was Lethal Jones, Berlin Armstrong, and Don Dozier were probably my 3 best friends. And they're all 3 dead now. But we all went to the Army together when we finished high school. And the same time. And we all played football together. And we didn't have to, nobody had a car until after they got into high school or out of high school. And in fact, we didn't have a car until I was probably in the 8th grade. My daddy didn't even have one. And of course, Daddy had a butane truck, and if we needed to go somewhere, we could go in that butane truck. But it was an experience, and it's something that I still cherish to this day. I mean, it was. I've told a lot of people that we were poor, but we really didn't know we was poor, because everybody else was poor too. But we never went to bed hungry, and we never wore dirty clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have been patched because I had 2 older brothers, and I got some of my clothes that was handed down from them. But I don't know what else to tell you about growing up in Wood Harrell. It was.
Well, what do you remember about the time growing up during either World War II or the Korean War? Do you remember
I remember,
much about that?
well, World War II, I was 6 years old. You know, it started
When it
42.
started, yeah.
And I do remember coming back from Littlefield, and I don't know, and we were driving, and when we heard that World War II started, and I remember everybody, like my mother and me and Mildred, and we started crying because we was afraid Daddy's going to have to go to the war. Well, he had too many kids. I mean, that back then they didn't take. He was an older man, and they didn't take people that had more than one or two or three kids. But I remember when President Roosevelt died, and Truman took over.
Yeah.
But the Korean War, I remember quite a bit about it. I was too young for the Korean War, but I remember one of our neighbors that lived down on there was a farm right behind our house, and at Mr. Brown's farm. I used to work for him some, but he had a son named Bobby Brown, and I remember when Bobby was killed in Korea. I do remember when my uncle was killed in World War II.
Yeah.
Uncle Leonard was shot down. He was a gunner, and he was shot down over Germany. And I do remember when he was killed. And but I don't know too much more about the wars. I remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Yeah. Well, what prompted you to go into the Army?
I got out of high school, and it's kind of a funny situation, but I got out of high school, and me and old Ethel Jones and Verlin Armstrong decided what we was going to do. We didn't have a job,
Yeah.
We could go hoe cotton or something, but that wasn't, and we didn't have money actually to go to college, and so there wasn't too many options left. So we decided what we'd do. We'd go to Brownfield and volunteer for the draft. And this is funny. We volunteered for the draft, and we said we're not going to tell anybody that we volunteered. And when we get our draft notice, we'll take it, and where there was one little place, a restaurant, or kind of a service station where a few of the boy teenagers hung out. Said what we'll do, we'll go down and we'll go in there and say, golly, I don't know what happened. And me and Don and me and Berlin and Lethal said, I don't know what happened. We got drafted, and we showed them, and it looked just like a draft notice. I mean, it was a draft notice because we volunteered for it. And all the older ones, a couple of years so older than we did, they all got real excited because they was afraid and they all went to the post office. Everybody had a post office. There wasn't no mail delivery to your house or anything.
Right.
You went to the post office. They all went to the post office to see if they got their draft notices. And we didn't ever tell anybody, but that's why I went to the Army. And I really, I didn't have money to go to college, like I said. And the options was kind of limited. And we knew that one of these days we was going to have to go anyway.
Yeah.
So we might as well go ahead.
Well, what was your job in the Army? What did you do?
Well, I went in the Army. I went in the 4th Anti-Aircraft Artillery there in El Paso. And then after I got out of basic training, and I went to Alaska, and I was in the 4th Anti-Aircraft Artillery up there, and I was in the radar plotting. We used to plot. First little while we plotted all the Russian planes that flew close to the big domain, little domain, those islands. Russia used to.
Yeah, Alaska.
In Alaska, And then I did that for a while, and then I was a clerk for the commanding officer for a while, and then the last year, or a little over a year, well, I played football and mostly didn't do anything except play football and work. And they have like little gun ranges downstairs in a basement of one of the buildings, and you had to work down there on the off time, and you'd referee basketball games, and it wasn't a bad life.
Well, how was playing football in Alaska?
Cold.
Yeah.
I can remember a couple of times where your mother, the football field was kind of down in a little bowl. You could park cars around the top of it.
Uh-huh.
It had seats there if it was, but your mother would sit in the car with the motor running, heater on, blankets, and we'd be down there playing football, and it was cold. One of the first games before it did really get too cold was one time on the first play of the game. Well, one of the blockers hit a referee and knocked him down, broke his leg. So we had to call a little bit of timeout while they got another referee to help with the game. But it was, it wasn't. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing football. The only touchdown I ever made in my life was in Alaska.
Oh, yeah?
I played lineman everywhere. And when I was in Alaska, I still played tackle. And one of the games that we won Alaskan Command twice. And one of the games that we won there that year, that we were behind, and it was just about the end of the game, and they was just about to score. And I went through the line and stood as a quarterback on the other team. They were on our goal line. And stood at him handing the ball off to his halfback like he's supposed to. Somehow or another it got in my hands.
He handed it off to you.
Yeah, and I was 50 yards down the field before anybody ever knew I had the ball. Or they'd have caught me.
So you were a slow lineman, not a fast lineman.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, what kind of, other than playing football when you were up there in Alaska that first time, what kind of things did you like to do
We fished
for
a lot.
recreation?
Fished a lot. And we, there in Fairbanks, we used to go gold panning also.
Yeah.
Out at Tenilcheck. We didn't have, I can tell you what we lived in Alaska when you was born. When we lived in an 18-foot trailer house. And they measured these trailer houses from the tongue of the trailer house to the back of it.
Yeah.
18 foot's not very much.
No.
And when you was born, you slept in a dresser drawer because we didn't have room for anything else.
So was this on the base?
On the base, I bought a trailer. My sister Mildred and Dan, my brother-in-law, lived on the base. He was in the Air Force, and they lived on the base in a trailer park when I went up there. And they give you so much money for living off base. And I was able to borrow enough money at the bank to buy a trailer house, and I think I gave like $1,200 for it, which is not very much money today. But we moved in that trailer house. First house we lived in Alaska was at North Pole.
Uh-huh.
It was a little bitty two-room house in North Pole, and I had to catch a ride every morning with somebody on into Eielson Air Force Base, and that was good. And we lived there till we was able to get our trailer on the base, and it had a chemical toilet,
Yeah.
no shower, and most of the houses there, or trailer houses, had a chemical toilet, and down the middle of the trailer park, there was a bathroom with showers and a laundry room.
So you'd have to walk
And you
down
go
there
down
to
there,
take a shower? I bet that was kind of chilly in
it's
the middle of
cold,
winter.
Yeah, but then, you showered quick and got back to the house quick.
So you lived on Eielson,
I lived on Eielson Air Force
but
Base.
I was born at Ladd.
He was born in Ladd because the hospital in Eielson was just a clinic. All they did is just treat cuts and bruises and colds, and they didn't deliver babies or anything like that. But when you was born in October 29th, it was cold. Well, they'd make the women that was pregnant go to Ladd Air Force Base to the clinic 3 or 4 days ahead of time for their due date. So we started over there, and we got over there, and like I think I've told you this before, about halfway, well, there was a wreck or somebody slid off the road, and we had to stop. While we stopped, well, there was I guess a 54 Ford that I had, that I'd bought, and it just slid off the road, and I had to get out and push it back up on the road. It was slick, and you could do that. And then we finally got to the hospital, and they said, well, it'd be a couple, 3 days. They said, won't you just go back to Eielson and come back in a day or two? I said, okay. So I told your mother, I said, well, I'm going to go get me a hamburger, and then I'll come back before I go back tonight. I said, okay. So I come back, and your mama wasn't where she was supposed to be. She's having you at that time.
Oh, yeah?
And so I just almost missed that. But anyway, she had you, and if we'd have waited another day or two, or got there a few hours later, you'd have probably been born in a car on the ice.
On the side of the road?
But there's a lot of experience. That 2 years that I was in Alaska, that time was, we had a lot of fun, and we had friends, and some of them would come and you'd play canasta or something like that.
Yeah.
You didn't. Every once in a while you'd go to the movies, but we didn't have a whole bunch of money because a PFC don't make a whole bunch of money.
Right.
And
so you said when you first went up there, you lived in North Pole, Alaska. I think you've said before that you went to First Baptist Church at North Pole.
First Baptist Church in North Pole, Alaska.
So how many people were there at that time?
At the First
At
Baptist
church, yeah.
Probably somewhere around 50, 75 people, something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
It went, and the pastor, that's another thing. It's a funny story. It's not a funny story. It's a good story. But the pastor was a boy by the name of Larry Ragland. Well, the church didn't have enough money to pay him, more than $100, $200 a month, I think. Anyway, Larry had a paper route, and he also had a mail. He delivered mail, and that's how he made the rest of his money. And he was as poor as the rest of us. Well, after I left Alaska, that was like in 1958, and I got back to the States. And when we lived in Victoria, Larry was assistant pastor at one of the Baptist churches there in Victoria. And then I didn't hear anything from him again until somebody told me he was in Bay City and we went to Bay City one time to see him. Well, then I went on my journey through life, like from Corpus to Alaska to Singapore, and didn't see him, for probably 8 or 10 years. And I got to Singapore, and we had a management seminar, and all the people, managers that worked for Otis Engineering in Southeast Asia had to go to that seminar. So we had to, on Sunday night, the seminar was going to start on Monday. Sunday night, Jody Pope said, well, I want everybody, all the managers to meet us, and we'll introduce you to the speaker and have dinner together. Okay. So I got there, and he started introducing us to this guy that's putting it on. Guess who it was?
It's Larry Ragland.
Larry Ragland. And he was richer than, he's a multimillionaire. I mean, he had this seminar, and I think Otis Engineering was paying him about $1 million a year just to go around and put on seminars. He had another business or two, but he made lots. He divorced his wife, and I don't know where down the road, but he married this other girl, and her dad was his name was Foreman, and it was Ragland Foreman Management Institute or whatever, and this Foreman was I think he had been a professor at SMU.
So did he remember you when you were introduced at the seminar?
We didn't have to get introduced.
Yeah.
We said, no way. Anyway, that was him. But he was a good guy. But when I knew him in Alaska, he didn't have any more money than we did, and we lived on about $180 a month.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about how you got started from when you left the Army into the oil business.
Well, when I left the Army and went into the oil business, I had put an application in a couple of places in Levelland, and so I didn't have a job. We rented a little house there in Levelland on West Houston Street, and was paying $35 a month for it. And I went to Stump said, "Won't you come to Abilene and get a job?" And I said, "Okay." So I went to Abilene. I got a job with this. Trying to think what, but they sold drugs, not drugs, but drugs.
Pharmaceuticals?
No, they didn't sell pharmaceuticals. It was like aspirins and Vicks Salve and a few other things. And got a job from them, and I worked one day. Dad called me and said, "You got a call, and Baker wants to interview you or something." So I said, "Okay." So I quit that job and went back to Levelland, and I didn't get hired, so I went to work for J.P. Bum Gibbons as a roughneck on a pulling unit. These are pulling units, one single pole pulling units. Pull one joint of tubing at a time, lay it down, pull 2 rods or 3 rods and lay them down.
Yeah.
And I worked for J.P. Bum Gibbons and use a baby, and I quit every night.
That wasn't that much fun, huh?
No, $1.60 an hour wasn't not very much fun either, but it was. I mean, it was enough to make a living. And then I'd go home and you'd be hungry, and so I'd go back to work the next day. And I did this for about probably 4 or 5 months. One time I tailed rods in a lake for the old Humble Oil and Refining Company, and they paid us double. It rained, and this well was down in a lake, and the water was about between knee and ankle deep. And they said, "If y'all get them rods back in the hole, we'll pay you double." Well, I tailed rods in tennis shoes and a bathing suit, and we got them rods back in the hole, and they paid us double. But then after a while, old Litchfield with Baker Oil Tools hired me, and that's where I started. I worked for Baker there in Levelland until 1959, and then that's when they closed that shop down, transferred me to Laurel, Mississippi, and I stayed over there 8 or 9 months, and then went to Victoria and about 2 years after I was in Victoria, well, I quit Baker and went to work for Otis Engineering. And the rest is history. I mean,
Yeah.
I traveled the whole world after that.
Well, tell me how it came about that we ended up back in Alaska again.
Well, that's another story. I had a manager in Corpus that didn't really like me, and I was the Packer salesman, lead Packer salesman, and he always was on me about something, and I did a good job, but one time I just got enough of him, and I said I'm gonna quit, and then I did, and I was over at a bar in the middle of the afternoon there in Corpus, and they sent an old boy named Waters over there and said, John Prejean wants to talk to you. Well, John Prejean was the international manager in Dallas. Said, John wants to talk to you. And I said, I don't work for Otis Engineering anymore. I already quit. He said, no, he wants to talk to you. He said, if you're not going to call him, he's going to call you here. And I said, I don't care what he does. I said, well, okay. So I went and called him, and John said, I want you to go back to work for us. And I said, John, I've already told some people, BJ Services in Hobbs, New Mexico, that I'd meet with them tomorrow. And I'm going out there and see what kind of job they have. Well, I got there. And in fact, I went to Mom and Daddy's house first before I went on to Hobbs. Mama said, John Prejean, somebody by the name of John Prejean or John something or other, been calling you all day. Said he wants to talk to you. I said, well, okay. So I called him. He said, meet me in Dallas tomorrow morning because we're going to Alaska. I said, John, I got to go talk to BJ first. He said, meet me tomorrow morning in Dallas because we're going to Alaska. So I drove into Dallas, and I said, on the way to Dallas, I had that old Ford Thunderbird, and I knew I was going to go to Alaska, and so I was in a service station in Idlewild, and somebody offered me $900 or something like that for it. And I said, no, I got to keep it for a little while longer. Anyway, I didn't take it, and I went on into Dallas, and John said, get on a flight, go to Corpus, get your clothes, meet me back up here in the morning. I already got all the reservations for you, and we're going to Alaska. And that's how I wound up in Alaska. He's a vice president. And he's the best man I ever knew that worked for Otis Engineering.
So what kind of things did you do for your job in Alaska? You said you were a Packer salesman in Corpus.
Yeah. When I went to Alaska, I wound up as I started out as everybody was what they called a commodity specialist, and then we ran Packers, we done wireline, we did everything. And the first job when I got to Alaska, I'd been there about a week, sitting in the little staff house, a little house that Otis had rented, and hadn't done anything, and so they called me and said, there's an old boy gonna meet you at gate 8 at the international airport tonight, 7 o'clock. You're gonna go down and do a job on the monopod for Union Oil of California. I said, okay, I'll be there. So I got there at 8 o'clock, and this old boy come up to me, little short guy come up to me and said, are you Otis? I said, yeah, I am. He said, I'm Bratcher. Let's go. So we went out, and there was a little 4-seated plane, and Bratcher got in as a pilot. And so I thought, man, this guy must be the pilot. So we took off, and we flew to Soldotna. And just about the time we got to Soldotna, Merle said, I never landed at this airport before, said, how's the runway? And Troy Hodges said, pretty rough. So we hit the runway and bounced, and Troy took it, and we circled and landed. Well, I found out Merle was a production foreman on the monopod.
He wasn't the pilot at all.
He wasn't the pilot at all. But we got out there and done the job, and then the next 5 or 6 years, Merle probably asked me 20 times if I wanted to go hunting or fishing or something across the inlet with him. And I refused. But during this time, probably 5 or 6 times you'd hear on the radio that Kenai pilot crashed across the inlet. Well, you didn't have to tell you who it was because it was Merle Brackett. And he walked away from all of them. And I still communicate with Merle. In fact, I got an email from him yesterday. He lives down here in South Texas, in the valley. But he landed on the lakes. It didn't matter where, he landed just anywhere.
Yeah.
And he'd patch the old plane up, take off, run out of gas, get some more gas.
Well, tell me about what kind of things you like to do when we went back to Alaska the second time.
Well, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Some of our favorite things was fishing, and probably not all of it was salmon fishing. We liked to go down to the lake and do lake fishing, and we liked to go up to Mr. Hans and let the bear chase you and bear.
Yeah.
And camp out. We had lots of. Bear probably remembers the night that me and Joe Yoder and Bear Bryant went fishing, and the tie rod fell apart on my El Camino, and we rolled over.
Yeah.
And we walked, 6 miles that night to get back to the highway or somewhere where we could call somebody to come get us.
Well, tell me what your favorite fishing or hunting story was from Alaska.
Well, hunting story, you probably was with me on the best hunting story when I won the flying moose hunt. We flew across the inlet, and you stuck your head out the window to take a little
Puke.
and lost your sunglasses.
Yeah, but we got a moose, didn't we?
I got a moose. We circled around, found the moose, landed, shot it, and then another plane landed, helped us cut it up, and we brought it back. And we ate on that moose for a year.
Yeah.
Best meat we ever had. That was a good hunting story. And the fishing, we used to go snag the old humpies. And when your Grandpa Roy came up there, he'd never caught more than 2 or 3 catfish at a time. And
Right.
took him out in 30 minutes. We had 30 humpies about the same size. And of course, we caught them illegally because you're not supposed to snag them, but we did anyway.
Probably shouldn't be telling that.
And anyway, I think the statute of limitations are.
Oh, okay. Well, what about going down to Homer and doing the crabbing and stuff?
That was good life, too. We'd go to Homer. We had this little camper. And time we got the barrel out of the camper, got a fire built. Well, Bear had already gone to the dock and caught a few Dungeness crabs. And we'd have the water ready, and we'd eat them, cook them and eat them. And then they were good. And then we'd go hunting or go fishing. And I'll never forget the time when I had this little 12-foot aluminum out with a 10-horse Evinrude motor on it. And Gordon Prentice, your coach,
Yeah.
his wife Barbara, who was about 9 months pregnant at the time, and your mother and me went out in the middle of Catchmack Bay to run the lines, and we had a shark on it. We had one of these cork jug lines.
Yeah.
And we had a shark on it. We pulled that shark in, and Barbara jumped out of the boat. And the water probably wasn't but 200 foot deep,
And probably about 20 degrees.
Yep. But that was another story. And that's fun. But we had, Kelly, there was so many things we did in Alaska. We organized football.
Well, tell me how that got started.
Well, that got started because when we left Corpus, you was playing football.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to leave your football. And I said, well, I'll make you a promise that when we get to Alaska, we'll start youth league football, because I knew they didn't have even high school football at that time. So we started high school football first, and
Did you help start that?
helped start that, get started, and then that was the next year when we started youth league football. And Carl Seymour, myself, a couple of others. Old boy by the name of Wiggins. You remember the Wiggins?
Oh, yeah.
And a couple more. Oh, Hewlin, John Hewlin. And we all got together. We said, we're going to start youth league football. Well, the first $5,000 for equipment came from us,
Who's us?
me and your mother.
Oh,
And we loaned it to the league. So we had no sponsors. We had to order the equipment, and we did. And by the end of the season, we got our money back through sponsors. And me and old Carl Seymour, they used to hate to see us coming, because they knew we was going to ask for a donation for something, baseball, football, or something.
yeah.
Anyway, we raised a lot of money, and everybody gave generously in Alaska. And that's how youth league started. Bear was the littlest kid that ever played in Alaska, I guess, still to this day. 44 pounds, playing with 80 and 90 pound kids, because 90 pound was the top weight but
So when we started, we just played in Kenai.
In Kenai.
And then they added some other teams later on.
We added. I helped them get started in Kenai first, and then what was his name? Palmer second, and then Anchorage third, and then we helped started in Fairbanks, and then Ketchikan. And I helped start it all. When we started the first year, we had 50 little kids. The last year when I left, there was 5,000 kids playing statewide. And I don't know whether there's still that many or not, but that's how the youth league football. In the first game of the season, and I've still got the clippings, and you probably have too somewhere, you scored 6 touchdowns. We ran away from them.
Yeah.
And
I can probably guess what the first offensive play was, too. 18 reverse.
18 reverse. Bear used to get the 18 reverse quite a bit. But and we had a good time. And then we started, after we'd played a couple of years, and we started in Palmer, we had the Oil Bowl every year.
Right.
And we'd invite somebody to come down and play in the Oil Bowl. Palmer usually, because Anchorage kind of had, I don't know, they thought that they were better than we were, but they wasn't. And anyway, we had the Oil Bowl, and we'd have a 2-day party usually. People from Palmer would come to the house or whatever. Me and Gordon Prentice were real good friends, and I know you're going to ask me about the football camp.
We're going to have to probably look at continuing some more of this
Yep.
later.
Yep.
Okay.
We're running out of batteries and times.
I'm talking too much?
Nope. Nope.
It's perfect. What I need to do, I need to do this, cut a little bit, and then we'll come back to some of those stories.
Is that turned off?
Why, did you miss some of my stories?
I haven't missed these stories yet, but I didn't want to.
Oh, okay.
Dad,
So-
Bear, is that turned off?
It is now.
Okay. I had 13 questions on here that I was going to ask you. I started with the first one.
And you're still on the first one?
No. But